We spend about 29% of our recurrent budget on health, so it's about 4.7 billion. It's grown 119% since we've been in government. That's over 10 years. When we started our healthcare plan back in 2006-7, the predicted annual rate of health budget was about 9% growth a year. The anticipated revenue growth for the state was about half that, so we anticipated the entire state budget would go on health by about 2032, so that's why we needed to have a strategy. The most recent budget increased the health expenditure by under 4%, so that I saw as a positive sign that some of the initiatives that we're putting in place to reduce pressures on hospitals, keep people healthier out of hospitals, are beginning to work.
Long term, how do you stop the spiral of ever-increasing growth above and beyond CPI?
Well, the issue for us is really will be managed by 2040 when the baby boomer generation dies out. So it's a period of time when a particular generation, our generation, works our way through, and there's a lot of pressures associated with that ageing bubble. So we have to work through on a sort of 30-year cycle. What we need to do is to make our hospital system as efficient as we can possibly make, and that means getting rid of overlap and duplication, poor practices, managing the resources as well as we can. It also means trying to have more services available outside of hospitals. That's where our GP Plus strategy comes in place, to keep people healthier and active in their own homes. So prevention, primary health care, chronic disease management, early diagnosis, all of those tools help manage our system. So mix of things.
The economists tell us that particularly in public sector growth in South Australia, that over recent years that's been driven by South Australia's expanding aged care needs. Now that's the economist's view. Do you have a health perspective on that?
Oh well, obviously it's true. The need to provide services for the ageing group in our population is very strong. We predicted when we did our health care plan in 2006-7 that by 2016 our population generally be growing about 4%, but that part of the population over 75%, over 75 would be growing at closer to 10%, and that part of the population under 14 would only be growing at 1%. So we have an ageing of our population, and older people need more healthcare. If you're over 65, you're twice as likely to need a hospital bed in the course of a year. If you're over 85, you're 5 times more likely to need a hospital bed. So every person over that particular age group increases the demand for health on average by a much greater percentage than just another citizen coming along. So yeah, it does drive a lot of what government has to do.
That's not something you can change in the short term though, is it?
No, and it's not something we should... I mean, I think it's something to be proud of. In fact, in 1890, the average life expectancy for an Australian male was 47 years and was just over 50 for a woman. 110 years later, we've added 30 years of life expectancy across the board. That's an extraordinary achievement. There wouldn't be a century in the history of humanity which can say that. It's a lot to do with the health services, but it's also separating sewerage and water and having vaccination and clean air and water and good housing and jobs and so on. That's a huge achievement, and obviously we have to pay the cost of that achievement, but we shouldn't say it's a problem. And I think as Minister for Ageing, I think that's part of the debate that I want to be part of, that this is a huge achievement. We should celebrate it and manage how we help manage those people who have these extra years.
Probably the biggest argument in recent times about health has been about the role of the federal government and the state government, and we saw a fairly solid attempt at reform or takeover of that. At the end of all of that process, by the end of 2011, were you satisfied with where it had landed?
Well, I think it's an improvement, so to that extent I'm satisfied. Prior to that agreement, the Commonwealth share of funding of hospitals had continued to decline during the Howard years. When Medicare was first introduced, it was introduced on the basis that the states and the Commonwealth would share the cost of hospitals at a 50% each. Under the Howard years, that had declined to 40% Commonwealth share, 60% state share. So there was a real cost shifting to the states. What the Rudd and then Gillard governments did through their reform processes was put a platform under that. We're not going back to the 50-50, but all the new dollars that go in, or the new costs that go in, will be shared on a 50-50 basis. And the Commonwealth's taking a much stronger and more proactive role in the primary health care and prevention area, which I think is a good thing. I mean, there's a lot more reform that you could do, but the complexities of Australia with all the states and the interest groups and so on, I think we got as far as we could expect to get in those circumstances.
Just finally, John Hill, you've been Health Minister, I think, since November 2004? Five. That's a long time.
Second longest serving Health Minister in South Australia's history.
Are you thinking about when you might call an end?
Lyle McEwen has the record. He was Health Minister for 26 years, so I've got a few years to go before I beat his record.
But you're in there sort of for the duration of this term of government? Or
Sure. I mean, they're the will of the people, the party, the Premier.
John Hill, thank you.